Welcome back to Birds of a Feather. This is your daily Baltimore sports podcast. My name is Nathan Stroud, and today we're going to be going over the Orioles and Mets Game 2 of this series, this three-game series that the Orioles and Mets are having. But this is also Game 1 of the doubleheader that's going on today. So Game 1 of this series in general obviously was 2 days ago on Tuesday. And yesterday there was no game because it did get rained out. Got postponed to today on Thursday, where there was 2 games for a doubleheader. The first game of the doubleheader just ended about 5 minutes ago, where the Orioles got a big win over the Mets to tie this series 1-1 going into the second game of the doubleheader, which starts in about 3 hours-ish. So that game starts in a few hours. That's going to be Game 3 of the doubleheader. So we still have another episode of Birds of a Feather coming out later today. But Game 3 of this series is happening in a few hours. Winner of that game takes the series, and obviously it is an extremely, extremely must-win series for the Orioles here. As I've said multiple times, these last 6 games, with this Mets series and this upcoming Marlins series starting tomorrow, these last 6 games going into All-Star break is really going to determine what the Orioles, are going to look like when it comes to the trade deadline, what they're going to look like post-trade deadline, and just kind of the mentality of this team moving forward throughout the rest of the season. And obviously there are some things that obviously take into account with the decisions that you make going into the trade deadline and what you want to do. But I will say that there was a trade that happened this morning about an hour before this game today, or the game that happened this morning. About an hour before the game, Bryan Baker did get traded to the Tampa Bay Rays. Obviously, Bryan Baker has been probably overall, other than Felix Bautista as the closer, Bryan Baker's been overall the best reliever for the Orioles this season. Not Felix Bautista, obviously, is the closer, but as an overall consistent reliever, Bryan Baker's probably been the best one for the Orioles this year. And we just traded him to the Tampa Bay Rays. And what was confusing about this trade is that Bryan Baker is actually not a free agent, and usually the trade deadline is where a bunch of pending free agents get traded for possible rentals or stuff like that. That's where a lot of the movement comes along, because obviously you have more of an incentive to trade them. But Bryan Baker is under team control until 2028. So he actually had quite a few more years left before his contract ended in Baltimore. So it was a little bit confusing of a deal. Obviously, Bryan Baker is still pretty young. Over the past couple of years in general, he hasn't been amazing, but this season he has been pretty consistent. He's stranded a lot of runners. Obviously, his last appearance that he had, he did give up that 4-run lead, so that wasn't good. Obviously, Bryan Baker, his last outing was not very good at all the last time that we saw him, which was actually 2 days ago when we lost to the Mets in that game where he blew that lead. But overall, on the season in general, he's been pretty consistent. But again, the trade, the Orioles were able to get the number 37 pick in the draft for this upcoming draft that happens, I think, this weekend. So the Orioles pick up another draft pick. That means that the Orioles now have 7 or 8 picks in the top 100 in this upcoming draft. And they also have, I think, 3 picks in the top 40. They have pick 19, pick 30, and now pick 37. They got pick 37 from the Rays. It's pretty much just a late first rounder, early second rounder. So to be honest with you, Bryan Baker, obviously, it's a reliever, and for you to be able to get a return for a late first rounder, early second rounder for a guy like Bryan Baker, you take that deal every single day. Obviously, it is disappointing to lose Bryan Baker because he's been solid for you all year, but the Rays giving up that pick is actually a pretty damn good haul that the Orioles got in return. So the Orioles now have a bunch of draft picks for this upcoming draft, whether that's developing these guys later for the future or, trading these guys who have potential for, obviously future big stars or, upgrading your team in general when it comes to trades. I don't know what's going to happen with that. Obviously, we know Mike Elias' reputation, everything like that, but we'll see what happens when the time comes. But the Orioles do trade Bryan Baker for the number 37 pick. I think it's a win-win on both sides. I think the Orioles get a really valuable draft pick in this upcoming draft. Obviously, late first, high second. That's not bad at all, especially for a reliever. And then the Rays also just upgrade their bullpen and get a very solid guy who can potentially go 2 innings for you as well. So not a bad trade for both teams. I don't think that this necessarily indicates that the Orioles are going to go into a fire sale. I still think it does rely on where the Orioles sit at like a few days before the trade deadline, before they really have to start making moves. So I think that all depends on what the Orioles season looks like, because again, the season is still within reach. We are still within reach of figuring it out and potentially going on that run and doing whatever we need to do. Especially with getting a win just now. And if the Orioles can get a win in the next few hours and beat the Mets and win this series, and then we can face Miami and potentially win that series too, then all of a sudden going into All-Star break, the Orioles, are on a little bit of a run, potentially 3 straight series wins. And then, you have about 2 weeks between All-Star break, or you have a week really between All-Star break and the trade deadline. See how those games work out, and then obviously make your decision whether you want to stand still, buy, or sell, because every team, has to determine that. Obviously, the Orioles do make a trade, but this isn't necessarily a trade that means, oh my God, we're going to sell everybody, it's over, everybody's gone. It does all, in my opinion, depend on how we do, and Mike Elias did say that this morning at a little mini press conference. He did say it all depends on where the Orioles are standing at in the standings, how far they're back from playoff spot, and just overall the record in general. So let's just go over this game that just ended. Going over this Mets and Orioles game. This game was crazy. Obviously, for a majority of this episode so far, we have talked about the Bryan Baker trade, which is a pretty big deal. Obviously, the Orioles got back a pretty big draft pick, and when you do trade one of your top relievers, so it was very much worth talking about. But regarding to this Orioles and Mets game, this game was crazy. Not a lot was going on for literally the first 7 innings of this game. In general, literally nothing was happening. Only 4 total runs were scored in this game. The Orioles won this game 3-1 over the Mets. Their record moves to 41-50, back to being 9 games below 500. And if they can potentially win the next game, they can move to 8 games below 500, which would be the closest they've been to 500 in in a couple of months. So we'll see what happens with that. Hopefully they can get the win with Tomo on the mound. But today it was Charlie Morton on the mound. He was fantastic in this game for the Orioles. But the biggest problem in this game for the Orioles, for the most part, was that there was literally no run support for the entire game all the way up until the very end in the 8th inning. From innings 1 through 7, the Orioles scored 0 runs. They got a few base hits. They got a couple of base hits here and there. But from the first inning to the 7th inning, the Orioles could not do a single thing, but the Orioles pitching was able to only hold the Mets to scoring 1 run in those first 7 innings of this game. That run came in the 5th inning off of I think it was a Tyrone Taylor, just RBI. But the Orioles pitching this game was absolutely fantastic. And they gave the Orioles all the opportunities in the world to get back into this game and potentially tie or win the game. And the Orioles did just that. In the bottom of the 8th inning, there was a walk to start off the inning, and then Gunnar Henderson hits a 2-run moonshot to right field over by Utah Street. Hits a big 2-run moonshot to give the Orioles a 2-1 lead, and then eventually Ramon Laureano drives in the 3rd run, and then eventually was able to stamp this game down. Felix Bautista was able to get the save in this game, another save for Felix, and the Orioles, have a very, very big clutch moment of the season. This was probably, that Gunnar home run, to be honest with you, is probably the most clutch home run we've seen this year. Or one of the most clutch shots that we've seen this year from the Orioles. Again, the Orioles were losing this game 1-0. Nothing was going on. We were losing 1-0. There was literally not anything going on. It was very chill. We were getting base hits here and there. We were, but nothing was really going on. We weren't really getting on base, but the pitching was doing an excellent job. The defense also was doing an excellent job in this game. And then eventually, obviously, in the bottom of the 8th inning, Gunnar Henderson completely saves the day and changes this game and turns this game upside down by hitting a 2-run homer that gave the Orioles the lead and eventually was the go-ahead run in this game to get the win. So a very big, clutch, late comeback win for the Orioles. Obviously, they were only down 1-0, so it was very possible for them to come back. But a lot of the times with this Orioles team, we've seen them losing 1-0, and if this was the earlier 2025 Baltimore Orioles, they would have kind of just laid down, died, and lost 1-0 and lost the series, lost this game, and it would have been all sad. But the Orioles understand how important this game is. They understand how important this game is. They understand how important the game later today is, and they understand how important this weekend series is because they understand that they really are in no position to drop any sort of games. Gunnar Henderson and Ryan O'Hearn did not start in this game. Ryan O'Hearn only got one at bat in this game, but and he actually he was the other run that scored in this game. So what was funny in this game was 2 of the 3 runs that scored for the Orioles were from players that didn't even start in this game in Gunnar Henderson and Ryan O'Hearn because they were on the bench to start this game. I'm sure they're going to be starting in Game 2 of this series because obviously, rubber match, very important game. But Gunnar Henderson off the bench, obviously pinch hit, 2-run homer, and then Ryan O'Hearn also got walked off the bench, and then Ramon Laureano was able to bring him in. So some very big off-the-bench contributions from Ryan O'Hearn and Gunnar Henderson. Obviously, your 2 best left-handed hitters were on the bench for a majority of this game, facing David Peterson, who was dicing this Orioles team up. He got through 7 innings, only gave up 1 run. And obviously the earned run was from Colton Cowser whenever he scored off the Gunnar Henderson home run. But looking at this game overall, done a lot of yapping this episode, so sorry about that. But the Orioles in this game had 6 total hits, scored 3 runs on those 6 hits. Obviously, all the scoring in this game for the Orioles came late, and it was very, very, very clutch for this Orioles team, and they understand how important this scenario of the season is. But Jackson Holliday in this game, he goes 1 for 3. Jordan Westburg goes 1 for 3. Ramon Laureano goes 1 for 3 with an RBI. He drove in that 3rd run of the game for the Orioles in the 8th inning. Tyler O'Neill goes 0 for 3. Ramon Urias goes 0 for 4. Colton Cowser goes 1 for 3 with a run scored. He was the other run that scored with Gunnar Henderson. And then Luis Vasquez got the start at shortstop. He eventually got pinch hit for Gunnar. Gunnar Henderson went obviously 1 for 1 with a 2-run homer. He drove in Colton. He drove in himself. It was insanely clutch. The stadium was rocking. There was a ton of people out there today, obviously, because it was a doubleheader. And yeah, a magical moment for the Orioles. We've really not really had a bunch of magical moments this season because obviously a majority of it has been a lot of bad. But it was really cool to see that magical, just cool moment for the Orioles this season. And a very highlight play for this Orioles season so far was that Gunnar Henderson home run. But again, Gunnar comes up clutch, saves the day, huge 2-run homer. Kobe Mayo in this game goes 0 for 2. Ryan O'Hearn goes 0 for 1. He gets walked in his only at bat and scores a run. That was the run that Ramon Laureano drove in. And then Jacob Stallings goes 1 for 3 as the 9-hitter, as the 5th string catcher. So overall, the Orioles offense didn't really do anything crazy, but they did have obviously Gunnar Henderson and Ramon Laureano coming up clutch in the bottom of the 8th inning. Gunnar hitting that home run. Ramon Laureano driving in. Ryan O'Hearn. Crazy series of events for the Orioles late in this game. Again, can't even begin to describe how clutch those runs were because it eventually got the Orioles the win. And every single win means so much for the Orioles, but every single loss also means 10 times more. So getting this win is big for this team moving forward. The Orioles in this game, the Orioles and Mets in this game only used 3 pitchers total. Charlie Morton in this game went 6 innings, only gave up 1 run. He gave up 4 hits and 3 walks, so he let on a good amount of base runners, but he was able to get out of traffic pretty well. Only gave up 1 run in 6 innings, had 4 strikeouts in the process, and 104 pitch count across 6 innings, and his ERA goes down to a 5.18. So he's at a low 5 right now. Charlie Morton, again, ever since like mid-May, he has completely turned his season around over the past couple of months. He's been excellent for the Orioles. And it's been really, really, really cool to see how his season has really turned around and changed for the better. And hopefully he continues to just do this because, again, we're going to need all these good starts. But yeah, Charlie Morton, overall, great game. Grant Wolfram did get called up today from AAA after the Bryan Baker trade. We did call up Grant Wolfram to replace him in the bullpen. And in his his third appearance for the Orioles this year, he goes 2 innings of work, gives up 1 hit, no runs, no walks, and has 4 strikeouts in 2 innings, including striking out the side in his second inning of work. And he actually gets the win in this game. So Grant Wolfram obviously was not expecting to get called up to the Orioles today. He gets called up. He comes to Baltimore. He obviously was already in Baltimore, but he gets called up and then gets the win and then strikes out the side, including striking out Juan Soto and Francisco Lindor. So that was really cool to see. And then Felix Bautista, obviously the mountain man himself, he goes in here and gets his 18th save of the season. 1 inning, no hits, no runs, no walks. Perfect 9th inning for Felix Bautista. And yeah, the Orioles get this win. We move on to Game 3 of this series that starts again in like 2 hours. And it is going to be Mets-Orioles. The pitcher for the Mets is undecided right now because I'm like 99% sure it is going to be a bullpen game for the Mets. So the Orioles are going to have the advantage in this game. It's going to be a bullpen game for the Mets because they are dealing with some pitching injuries. But Tomoyuki Sagano was actually supposed to start yesterday. His start got pushed back to the later game today. So Tomoyuki Sagano getting the start in this second game of the doubleheader. Obviously, he has struggled quite a bit here in his past few starts. But again, all we're looking for is a big bounce-back game from Tomoyuki Sagano. I'm talking maybe 5 or 6 innings with only giving up 2 or less runs. That would be ideal from Tomoyuki Sagano because he needs to have a big bounce-back game against a very good Mets offense that has a lot of stars. So looking for Tomo to have a big bounce-back game, and also looking for the Orioles offense to be a lot more aggressive in this game and put some runs up on the board early instead of having to go through the stress of coming back late. But a win is a win no matter what, and the Orioles obviously get a huge win today to tie the series up 1-1. I will have another episode up later today talking about this game that happened. So probably within the next 5 hours or so, I'll have another episode up talking about this game, and hopefully the Orioles can end up winning this series over the Mets. That would be a huge, huge series win. Obviously, the Mets are heavily favored in this series. They're one of the best teams in baseball. And if the Orioles can get a win over them in this series, that would be very, very big. But thank you guys so much for tuning into and listening to this episode of Birds of a Feather. If you like this content, make sure to subscribe and like the video on YouTube and follow up on Spotify. And also, if you want more content on my X account and my Instagram, make sure to click the link in the bio of whatever platform you're listening on. Make sure to give those a follow. Live tweeting throughout every single Orioles game and also posting updates on my Instagram every time an episode is up as well. So make sure to give those a follow. This is episode 90. It's crazy to see how far that we've come. Thank you guys again for all the support you guys have given me. Having a ton of fun doing the show. It's been the time of my life, and I really enjoy, showing love and, talking about the teams that I love most in this world. So thank you guys so much for all the support you guys have given me. I'll have another episode up later today talking about Game 2 of this doubleheader series, and it's also the rubber match game of this series as well. So if the Orioles win, they win the series. If they lose, they lose the series, and they need to win this game to win the series. They need a series win. I'll say it 10,000 times because, again, this Orioles team is in no position to drop a series. If they drop a series, they pretty much can kiss the season goodbye. So we'll see what happens later today. Hopefully the Orioles can get a win, but we'll see what happens. I'll see you guys later today. You have a great Orioles day. I'll talk to you later. You have a great Orioles day. Peace out.